David Hoyne. David's a senior construction engineer with GPI and is here today to speak about bridge preservation and bridge management for the local owner.
One of the best practices when you deliver a presentation is to understand your audience a little bit. And when I got here and looked at the registration form, I saw there was basically 2 local bridge owners. I think there was one gentleman from Merrimack, New Hampshire, and another maybe from York, Maine. So hopefully they're still here today. When you look at the title of this, Bridge Preservation and Bridge Management for the Local Bridge Owner, and you might be asking yourself, well, what's in this for me at this point? There's a couple takeaways that I want you to focus on, understanding that a lot of you folks are DOT and maintenance-related people. The one thing that I do know is that you folks interact with the locals on a regular basis, okay? So hopefully you'll take away something from this presentation that you can share with them and help inspire them on their path of bridge preservation and bridge management. The other thing is that what I'm going to present may have some use for you in your day-to-day operations, right? It's basically a methodology. It's a process of how you get from where you are to where you want to be. And so look at it from that light. If you zoom out a little bit, it's not just about bridge preservation and bridge management. You can apply it to your world in maintenance as well. So hopefully at this point, I don't need to convince you that bridge preservation makes sense and that a bridge management system is the foundation. I don't need to convince you that bridge management is the basis of your bridge preservation program, right? You got to stand up some form of bridge management system in order for you to take advantage of a lot of the bridge preservation. You buy into bridge preservation much in the same way that you buy into changing the oil in your car. Fixing a leaking roof may be considered a best practice. That if you put braces on your children's teeth, makes you a good parent. But generally the idea here is that fixing small problems, while they're less costly, just makes good economic sense, right? We all buy into that. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to run away from worst first, and we're trying to move towards more of a life cycle approach where you're dealing with maintenance, preservation, rehabilitation, and of course there are some replacements there as well. So if this all makes so much sense and we buy into it, then why is it so difficult, right? Is it safe to say that not everybody here has a successful bridge preservation program and a functioning bridge management system? I'm guessing that there's room for improvement across the board, and it doesn't matter at the owner that you are, whether you're a local owner or a state DOT. There's probably room for improvement. So here's some of the questions, right? If it makes so much sense, then why do we struggle to implement bridge preservation? Why does bridge management system seem so overwhelming? Why are there so many unfunded preservation activities? Why is it so difficult? And why is it even more difficult for the local owner? When we talk about local, let's spend a few minutes trying to define who's local and who is not. And I'm going to tell you that in my estimation, if you're greater than 150 bridges, then you don't qualify as a local. And the analogy I'll throw out to you is it's sort of like Sam Adams in Sierra Nevada. Okay, you may be craft beer, but you're not local anymore, okay? So if you got to be less than 150 to really be a local. But we've got this other group between 150 and less than 500. And you want to be a local, but sorry, but you're not a local. And in your situation, you may have some type of formal bridge management system at your disposal, and you may have some form of technology, right? And it may be an in-house grown spreadsheet, and it may be some database that you've built up over time, and hopefully you've sort of identified the person on your team that has sort of stepped forward, has an interest in it, they're capable of doing it, they understand bridges, they understand technology, and they've made something work for you. Our next group is if you have, say, more than 500 bridges. You're definitely not a local, and even if you're not a DOT, if you're a large county or a large city or something, then you're not a local, but you probably have a formal bridge management system. You've allocated the resources, and you've positioned yourself for success. Now, it doesn't mean that you're successful, but you've at least positioned yourself for success. You've got the resources. Point out one other quick thing. With the buckets, what we're really talking about here by placing the buckets of less than 150, between 150 and 500 bridges and greater than 500 bridges, what we're really talking about is the systems that you have at your disposal to manage your network, okay? And the idea here is that if you've got more than 500, you've got the resources, you've got a system in place, that's probably working. 150 to 500, you probably have some homegrown system. But if you're less than 150, and you don't have any system, the reason why I chose 150 is based on this thing called the Dunbar number, and it basically establishes that the human brain can't handle any more than about 150 relationships. So if you're a small local owner and you tend to want to know your bridges like a community, like a family, you really can't handle more than about 150 of those relationships. And so anything greater than that, you're going to need some type of system to help you on your path. So let's transition here into talking about some of the challenges that bridge owners have. If you're, again, greater than 500, you've got a management system, dedicated staff, but you've got this thing called an institutional inertia. And what is that? Institutional inertia is basically when somebody says, well, that's the way we've always done it, right? So that's the way the organization works, that's where you're at, and it's really tough to change. The culture identifies that and says that it's not just the way we've been doing it, but this is the way we're going to keep doing it. And so organizations develop culture, and it's really tricky to change that culture. And the reason it's hard to change that culture is because of the change management issues. My experience with the DOT, you see a lot of wonderful initiatives and great ideas, and they burn up like a star entering the atmosphere because we don't address and understand how we need to change an organization. We're in this middle bucket of 150 to 500 bridges. You're resource constrained. You are just surviving your day-to-day operations. Life is hard enough as it is, and standing up a new initiative like a bridge management system or bridge preservation is just enormously challenging, and on top of everything else that you're trying to do makes it really, really difficult. And of course, we're all faced with this last bullet, attracting and retaining talent. I'm guessing, I don't need a show of hands, but I would assume everybody here could use more skilled and talented employees. With this group that we're trying to hone in on here, our locals, less than 150 bridges, again, you may just be completely overwhelmed at the prospects of standing up a bridge management system. The reason why is that there may be this misconception that a bridge management system requires specialized software, complex rules, equations and algorithms, and needs to be run by somebody like half my age, okay? And while certainly a more robust system offers much more functionality, well, that's true, this does not have to be an all or nothing proposition, okay? So the analogy is just because you can't afford a Porsche doesn't mean you shouldn't buy a car, right? You've got to start somewhere. Challenge for the local bridge owner, you're resource constrained, right? And so maybe there's a limitation on what you can self-perform. Maybe that's a function of the skill set of your crews, your financial capacity, maybe developing contracts and so forth. So there's also a constraint on resources as well if you're local. Okay, so let's get into how do we help, because we all want these folks to be successful. I think Raj would point out that like half of our nation's inventory is a bridge owned by a local. So we can't just look past all of the bridges in the hands of local owners when we talk about changing and bending the curve of bridge preservation. So we want to be successful, we want practical solutions. So what's the path forward? And anybody asks you, where do we start? The answer is always, we start at the beginning. And we start by taking really simple steps. And the first thing you do whenever you begin this path, and it doesn't matter if you're going grocery shopping or you're managing a network of bridges, okay? The first thing you do is you take inventory, because you can't fill up the fridge with the right things if you don't know what you already have. And so taking inventory is the first step. It's the foundation of your bridge management system. And so what is inventory? It can be anything you really want it to be. It can be complex attributes and condition states. It could be some basic information. It's really up to you to decide what it is that you consider your inventory. But here are a few things that I would argue are common attributes that you really want to develop within your inventory, right? So we want to know where the bridge is. We want to know how old it is, type of bridge, its repair history, a little bit of as-built information, and your current condition information that you can get from your NBIS condition assessment. And now, this is one I always like, and it's something we use when we teach the bridge inspection refresher course. Everybody's used to say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, in bridge inspection, it's only worth 500 words because it doesn't tell you the whole story. You know, we saw earlier today some presentations on delaminations. Well, yeah, you can take a picture of that concrete, it looks great, but guess what? It's completely delaminated. So take lots of photos, but just be mindful they don't tell you the whole story. So the first thing is we're going to capture our inventory. For us to do anything, let's face it, we need resources, right? We need people, equipment, and funding. And if we don't have any of those, we have all kinds of problems, but we need to start by understanding what do we have for people and equipment, the number of employees, our crews, the skill set of those folks, and we want them to be successful, so we try to align their skills with the tasks. and then we get into assigning responsibilities. Third leg of that stool of people and equipment in terms of resources is funding. My recommendation is that you determine your annual allocation and your trends for the last 5 years. So you want to know how much can be invested in the network and what has been the past history, the past track record, what you've had for investing in your bridge network. And so here's this little question, right? What if there's no budget or a dedicated budget? Well, that's even another reason why you need to double down and get a bridge management system, because that is the tool that is fact-driven and that you can use to generate information to the decision makers as to why you need to acquire some dedicated funding for your preservation and your management system. What is a bridge management system? What's one of the things we want to come out of our bridge management system? Basically, there's a number of different things, but in terms of preservation, we're looking at a list of actions, a set of treatments, and a list of all projects, right? So we want to identify from our management system those bridge preservation activities. And so the question is, where does this information come from? As a local bridge owner, I don't have a complicated system. Where do I get this information? Let's go right to our NBIS condition assessment report. Whether it's in there now or whether you direct the inspectors in the future, take advantage of the narrative that they supply with their inspection reports, because within that narrative, I'm pretty comfortable that they will tell you, hey, the expansion joint was plugged and it needs cleaning. The bearing seats are full of debris preventing movement. There's spalled concrete on the deck, needs patching. Again, this is an evolution, it's a process. So over time, you can train those inspectors to identify some of these needs, and what you want to do from those narratives is capture those recommendations, okay? Pull that information out, capture them. And once you have that information, then you want to compare that with your inventory data. So here are these recommendations. I'm going back to my inventory and I can say, okay, well, I know these bridges are not very old, and yet I'm seeing these issues identified. So how can I compare those to make sure that I'm keeping my good bridges in good shape? I'm identifying the projects that really should be in the rehab bucket, and then I also clearly know which ones are just holding on until the very end and they get replaced. So balancing your inventory information and what you find from your inspection reports really helps you identify the right candidates for preservation projects. With any of this, you always need to go out and do a field review. These are some of the questions. Is it the correct treatment? Is there other work that should be performed at the same time? Can this work be postponed? Is work on this bridge a priority? Accuracy of the scope and estimate, and any site constraints, traffic control, environmental issues, and access, and things like that. So you want to go out and do this field review to really sort of fine-tune any of your proposed recommendations. We've got to make this fiscally constrained. This is just an example of if you plotted your budget over time, you may look at your investment profile and say, okay, this is what I've been spending on maintenance, this is what I've been spending on preservation, rehabilitation, and replacements, and so I sort of know where I'm at. But if you don't have that yet, then the next thing you can do is really just set yourself some goals as a starting point, okay? Again, we're talking about the local owner who's got to get off the ground somehow, so start somewhere and say, okay, I'm gonna allocate 50% for replacements, 25% for rehabs, I'm gonna dedicate 15% for preservation, and maybe 10% for maintenance. Start there, and over time you'll hone in on what the right numbers are and where you need to grow the program. And really, so that's pretty much it, right? That's what you're looking at in terms of a bridge management system. You've got your inventory, you've identified your needs, you've formulated some treatments, and you've made them fiscally constrained. So it really doesn't need to be any more complicated than that to get going. But we're not done there, right? We're not done yet. We look at some other preservation work. We have not only the condition-based activities, but then we also had these cyclical activities. And so you can identify some activities such as removing winter sand and debris, cleaning your bridge seats, cleaning your substructures and waterproofing, and really begin to say, okay, set some goals for that. Plug here for the expert task group bridge cleaning. There's a guide out there. Again, like we've been talking a lot about the expert task group bridge preservation guides. There's a bridge cleaning guide out there, and that'll give you a lot of great information on some of these more cyclical activities that you can do. So what you want to do with these time-based actions is set some goals for yourself, right? Decide that you're going to remove the sand and debris every year. You're going to clean the drains every year. You're going to wash every bridge once every 2 years. You're going to waterproof the bridge. And so now you've got this well-balanced system between some of your condition-based preservation treatments, but also your cyclical ones. And again, start somewhere, set some goals, and make those things happen. But again, like I said, we're not done yet. So what's our final step in any process is you've got to track your accomplishments, right? For this system to work and for it to improve over time, you want to track your accomplishments and feed that back into the inventory, feed that back into your process, so that in time you will build on your knowledge base, you'll get a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more nuanced, and over time you'll have a system that really works for you. It's closing the loop. So again, a quick graphic of, you start with your inventory, plan your operations, you validate them with your field reviews, then you execute on those, and of course there's always the evaluation, and then you feed that evaluation back into your information, which is your inventory, and the process continues, right? It's an evolution. The idea here, let's put ourselves in the mindset of the local owner who doesn't have anything, who may be completely overwhelmed at the prospects of standing up a bridge management system. Where do I start? I start small, I start simple, and I'm successful at that. And then I listen to my feedback, whether it's feedback on treatments that work, feedback on how your inventory system is working, or your inspection reports are delivering to you. Listening to that feedback and making improvements on that feedback. My experience in almost 30 years of government, it's always the avoid the analysis paralysis. Think of the lost opportunities on bridge preservation. If you spend 5 or 10 years trying to buy the Porsche when you just want to get from A to B, think of all those missed opportunities when you could be doing something, and something is better than nothing. And so I really firmly believe in you start small and simple, be successful, use that feedback, build on that, and that doing something today is far better than doing nothing at all and not knowing where to start. So it's really simple. Start at the beginning, start simple, and be successful. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. Totally understand. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.